Just out of magic, it just happens. So
Right.
yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today for our September Lunch and Learn. And we have special guest Finn Jones from Trans-cendance here to talk with us today. And if you'll go ahead, Finn, and just kind of talk a little bit about yourself and start your presentation. And Finn, do you have anything that you need to do with the share screen?
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
share the presentation, and this isn't going to be what I normally do. I mean, I'm just going to do a touch on some basic points to help understand language a little bit better in definition.
Yes.
Typically, my trainings are 2 to 3 hours long. If you ever want to do a training with me, I'm happy to do that. I can do it virtually. I can do it, whatever is the best for you. But I'm highly encouraging organizations like yours and Cook Children's and other organizations I work with to do at least a 2 to 3 hour training at some point, with some, practicing and some, and I make it a lot of fun too. So.
Okay, good. No, that's a great opportunity. We're always looking for those kind of opportunities. We have in the past had quarterly service trainings that go like for 3 hours, and that would be a really good opportunity for us to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, so I'll jump into this a little bit. So my name is Finn Jones, or Finnegan, whichever y'all choose. Just don't call me Ben. I get Ben a lot.
Ben.
Ben a lot. I don't have a grizzly bear, so yeah. So I'm a trans guy. I started my transition almost 10 years ago now. It's surprising it's gone so fast. Here in Dallas, in this area, I started with therapy, and then about 9 months later started medications, hormones, and my life changed from there. I can go into that a little bit more, but it's just been a roller coaster of joys and emotions and, everything in between. But what Trans-cendance International does, my wife and I founded this organization 10 years ago when I started transitioning. And I founded it because at the time, my wife was my girlfriend and I didn't want to lose her. And there was no support out there for spouses and partners of trans individuals across the country. There was no support at all. So the divorce rate was high, of course. It's still high, but it's gotten much better since we've been able to create support systems across the United States. So what we do is we facilitate and create support groups. Before COVID, we had 5 support groups in so if you do find someone or you meeting some night, you can find them on our calendar. I'll throw our website in the chat here in a minute. And you can find them on our calendar. We have a separate night for trans individuals and gender questioning individuals. And then we have a separate night for parents and spouses. And anyone on the parents and spouses night is more than welcome to log in and just ask questions and just meet some folks, particularly parents of transgender kids, and talk to them and learn about their experiences as parents of transgender kids and spouses. So I invite everyone to join that meeting sometime. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to give you short little definitions, what to do, what not to do, how not to offend someone, which is also very, very important. If I can find my thing here. So we're going to do a quick little, like I said, this is like a precursor to what I do. So it's living transgender, and we'll go past that real fast. So what does transgender mean? Transgender has become an umbrella term that encompasses all gender identities outside of the binary, meaning male and female. So anything that is outside of that binary falls underneath the term transgender. So you've got gender fluid, gender question, all of those fall in there. And so a transgender person like me is someone who's basically my body did not line up with my brain. What I saw in the mirror was not what my body looked like, if that makes any sense to anyone, which over time growing up just caused more and more mental health problems within myself. Because I grew up, in the 60s, I was born in the 60s. So back then, in that time when I'm growing up in the 80s and 90s, trans folks were still in the shadows, essentially. There wasn't a lot of care out there unless you went outside of the United States and in the mental health field. So Chaz Bono and Caitlyn Jenner are really the two people who really pushed it forward for us. So what does cisgender mean? Cisgender means if you are comfortable in your own skin, as in your own gender, then you are considered cisgender, right? So it's basically if you're comfortable with the binary that you were assigned at birth as from your doctor, then you're cisgender. Now, is that going to be the same your entire life? Maybe not. We all change over time. You may question your gender at some point. You may not even think about it. But I'm here to help you understand why it's important to, even as a cis person, just question your gender occasionally, because it gives you perspective into how I feel and other trans people feel. So what does SOFA mean? I think we coined this term or this, but significant other, family, friend, and ally. And that is what our support group meeting is for our parents and SOFAs and allies and friends. We created a support system for them because having conversations with each other is how we fix these issues and how we get to the problem and get to the solutions, right? And get to the solutions within a family. We learn so much about each other within these support group meetings because we're having the meaningful conversations that we should be having. So we've been able to help several families within this. And I added drag queen and crossdresser in here because most people get all these three mixed up, right? And then throw sexual orientation in there, and wow, woo, my brain is swimming. So here's the deal. Here's what you need to remember. A drag gender of clothing as just as an enjoyment. A person is someone like me who has more than likely has gender dysphoria, sees a therapist for it, and then continues on a medical and social track to be able to line our gender and our bodies together. So remember this rule, if a drag queen happens to be transgender, that's a coincidence. If a drag queen happens to be a crossdresser or a cis person happens to be a crossdresser, that's a coincidence. If a drag queen happens to be trans and happens to be gay, that's a coincidence. And it's because we all run within that same community, right, for a bunch of different reasons, but it's a coincidence. One does not predict the other. One does not predict the other. Remember that.
Okay.
Yeah. So perfect example. I was born female. I grew up, came out as a lesbian at 17 years old, came out as a lesbian, lived as a lesbian my entire life until 42 years old when I started transitioning. Now I'm perceived as a straight man, but I don't consider myself straight. I consider myself queer. And that's a whole nother lesson that we can talk about at some point. But I do not consider myself a lesbian anymore, although I'm holding on to that card. But I don't consider myself a lesbian anymore. But you will hear transgender women express and identify as a lesbian. So that's, there's all different conversations that can be had within that context. But sexual orientation does not predict gender identity. Gender identity does not predict sexual orientation unless you're a woman who loves women. Then you're identified as a lesbian. So there you go. So gender identity. What is your gender identity? Your gender identity is your deeply held internal belief and of who you think you are, right? Your sense of who you think you are. As a child before puberty, I thought I was a boy. I thought I was a boy. I acted like a little boy. I played like a little boy. It was at one point my grandmother even told my mom, I think Stace was supposed to be a boy. I don't think, but then puberty hit and all hell broke loose. Once puberty hit, it threw my whole world off track. I could never figure out what was going on. And it just add other stuff on top of that. And it was just a nightmare. And that's what a lot of our kids are going through right now. Gender expression is how we express ourselves out in public or in the world. It could be your clothing, your dress, your hairstyle, your jewelry, your shoes, any way you express your gender in the world. If you wear more masculine clothing or more feminine clothing or androgynous, you choose to be a little bit more androgynous, gender fluid. So gender expression is how you express your gender. Sexual orientation is who you love. It's who you love, right? We always say in our field, gender identity is who you go to bed as at night. Sexual orientation is who do you go to bed with at night, right? If you remember it that way, then that'll help you understand the difference. So sexual orientation is who we love, who we're romantically attracted to, who we're physically attracted to. And that can also shift and change and morph over time, depending on where you were born, where you grew up, what religious affiliation are you, what non-religious. So all these factors play into all of this, except that I came out as a lesbian. I always felt like I was in love with women, and I still do now as a trans man. I'm still attracted to women. So gender nonconforming is a term used to describe some people whose gender expressions is different from the expected of the binary, right? Outside of female and. So our oldest child, who identifies as Ryan, was labeled female at birth, but they actually identify as gender nonconforming or gender binary. And if you look in their closet, they have male clothing and female clothing. And it's however they feel that day when they wake up. They feel, a little bit more masculine, they wear a little bit more masculine clothing. And a lot of times they're just non-binary, androgynous is another word that you can't, by looking at them, you couldn't tell what gender they are. And that's perfectly fine. So non-binary is someone who does not identify with any gender. Terms to avoid. This is very important, especially in y'all's field. So transgendered, if you see the end ED on the end, that is grammatically incorrect in the first place. It's, if you talk to, my wife was an English teacher at some point. She said that's just grammatically incorrect. And the way to remember that is nobody did this to me. Nobody transgendered me. Nobody tied me to a table like the X-Men and, did all this to me. I did this. I chose to do this for myself to have a better life. Nobody transgendered me. So it's transgender. Transition. Transition is the term for a person who is transgender and is medically or socially or both transitioning. A transgender in quotations. You don't say Tony is a transgender, right? I am a transgender person. Transgender is my identity. Person is the noun. I am a transgender person. So that's the best way to remember that. And then there's a great article in Time magazine with Laverne Cox, the transgender tipping point. I think it came out in 2017. It was around the time of the bathroom bills. So that's a great article to look at. Transvestite is an old term we don't use any longer. A person, typically a man, who derives pleasure from dressing in clothing of the opposite sex, which actually is a cross-dresser. So transvestite has basically, the term is changed to cross-dresser. Now you'll hear people, our elders within the community that came out, transitioned in the 60s and 70s, they'll still use that term from time to time, but you really won't hear it within the younger folk any longer. Tranny, very derogatory term, just like any other derogatory term in other communities. You might, and just like other communities, you might hear someone like me calling another trans person a tranny, which I would never do, but you will hear that just like within other communities. That does not make it okay for you to use it. So just remember that, just like any other community. Transsexual is an outdated medical term. You'll still see it occasionally, but it basically means someone who has taken all of the steps medically and socially to transition. They've had all the surgeries, they've had all the hormones. A lot of people don't realize this, but I will have to be on hormones for the rest of my life, unless they can come up with some way, which I wish they would, to just get it and be done. I will have to do shots the rest of my life, or ointments or creams or whatever, to be able to maintain my physical form essentially and not go backwards. And that's true of all transgender people. So it's a medication that we take on a weekly or monthly basis. So here's inappropriate questions to ask. And this is good for y'all to know too. Are you a boy or a girl? I used to get this a lot when I was growing up because I was very androgynous as a teenager. So I would typically get it from little kids. So you're a boy or a girl, and it was very harmful. It's very hurtful. So if you ever, see a child do that, just try and express to them that that's just kind of rude and inappropriate. So it's rude and it's harmful to someone's mental well-being. Do you pee standing up or sitting down? Why is that any of your business? I mean, seriously, why is that anyone's business about anyone? So just, it's none of your business. Do you ask about genitalia surgeries? You only need to ask this if it is relevant to the situation that you are handling at the time, or paperwork or anything else. And this is where like Cook Children's is concerned, because do we ask this? So it's that, when do we ask this? Do we need to ask this if we do find out? And so it's just don't ask unless if it's relevant to your situation at the time, just don't ask. Do not label someone who hasn't labeled themselves, right? And we do this all the time, right? I find myself doing it occasionally. So, you'll see a really effeminate man and go, oh, he's got to be gay. That's labeling someone that you've never even met, right? In the LG world, it's called gaydar, right? In the trans world, it's called transdar. But on that note too, if let's say you're an ally to the trans community, which is fantastic, but let's say that you're in a grocery store and you know that there's a trans person standing next to you in the line. Do you say anything to them about, hey, I'm an ally for the trans community? Would you say that? I would hope you wouldn't, because that is telling that trans person that you can see that they're trans, which means that their mental health was just harmed because they realize they're not passing, right? Because if you can recognize them as a trans person, now they feel like the entire world can recognize them as a trans person. So it's never appropriate to approach someone out in public and basically out them. Now, if you have a trans button on your purse or your backpack, make sure that they can see that. But don't ever say something to someone who you assume or think that may be trans. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah, could you explain what passing means?
Oh, absolutely. So passing is actually a term that's starting to go out in our community too, which is great. But passing means, let's see, when I started transitioning, I had to wear binders to compress my chest so that my breasts didn't show, right? So I would wear big baggy shirts, and I would wear big baggy jeans so my hips wouldn't show, and that's considered passing. So you're trying to, and the reason the term is going out is because it makes it sound like we're trying to pull something over on someone, and we're not. We're basically trying to identify as the gender we are out in the world, as much as we possibly can without medication. Because there are lots of trans folks out there who are unable to take these hormones. So they do the best they can, which is called passing. So they will find the right clothing that works for them. They'll find the right hairstyles, the right makeup, things like that. And people will help them pass as their identity. And also in that, the word preferred is going away within the community. And the reason the word preferred is going away is because I am male. It is not my preferred pronoun. I am male. And that's why that's going away. The word preferred is going away. So thank you for that question. That's a great question. Does that make sense? You're basically trying to pass. So you're trying to do the best you can with what you have. But a lot of us elders now, I've been called an elder. A lot of us elders help our young people do that, because we know what clothing works. We know what hairstyles work. We know what to hide, what you don't need to hide. We also know about the safety of binders. and the clothing that you need to wear. So we can help people wear the right and proper clothing that's healthy for them. So don't ask someone whether they were born a boy or a girl. That's none of your business anyway. So it's just, if it's not relevant to what you're doing at the time, then it's not an appropriate question. Do not ask someone what their birth name is. You'll hear the word dead name a lot of times too, referred to that. I don't allow that term within Trans-cendance. But you'll hear dead name, birth name. I use chosen name and given name. So given name is your birth name. Your birth name is what your parents gave you on the birth certificate when you were born. You had no choice in that name. You had no choice in the gender they gave you either. So you have to remember that too. But the proper term would be given name or chosen name. My given name was Stacy Jeanette. My chosen name is Finnegan Stacy, right? So I chose Finnegan and Stacy. Well, I didn't choose Stacy, but I moved it to my middle name to just, actually, it was just too much trouble to come up with a middle name. I'm just going to keep Stacy in there. So yeah, so remember that. You'll hear the word dead name. And the reason that I don't allow that in Trans-cendance is because it has the word dead in it. And we work with parents and family members, and I try and stay as positive as I can. So if you can try, avoid that term. Now, there are trans people who use that term all the time, and I don't say a word to them. If that was what works for them, then more power to you. Don't be nosy. Basically, just don't be nosy. If it's a question that would offend you, then it's going to offend someone else, right? I would never just ask someone about their surgeries. That's just crazy. So this is what you look like if you do any of those things. And someone posted this the other day, and I said I have to put this in my class. It's just too good, because I'm going to start answering mischief. I mean, but it tells you but the reason I put this in here, honestly, is to help you understand how me as a trans person and other trans people feel when we get these questions all the time. It's why are you so intrusive in my life? So these are the answers you might get. This is a tool. I'm not going to go into this too much because you can do your own research on this, but this is a tool that we use in Trans-cendance. We actually have an exercise that I do in my trainings, my 2 to 3 hour trainings that I do with the cis community especially. And so basically your gender identity is in your head. It's what you see in the mirror. When you look in the mirror, what you see, like when I was growing up, I never saw in the mirror what was in my head at all, ever. Especially when I went to like buy clothing and have to try on clothing. By the time I got out of there before transition, by the time I left the dressing rooms and the store, I would be so depressed. I would just go home because I never saw what I saw in my head in the mirror. So your gender expression, like we talked about before, is how you express your gender, right? Whether you wear skirts or dresses or shoes, pumps or boots, it's the clothing and how you express, right? So yeah, your makeup, your hairstyles. It's amazing when you start thinking about how much stuff is gendered though in our societies. Like, why is shampoo gendered? Why does shampoo have to be gendered? I mean, do we have different hair? When you really start thinking about the things that are gendered, you're like, oh my God, that makes no sense, And I love the fact that like Target has now gotten rid of the pink aisle and the blue aisle, and it's just toys, right? For kids. They're not gendering toys any longer in Target. And I wish that more stores would do that. So yeah. So sex assigned at birth, we talked about that a little bit. The doctor's either going to label you male or female or intersex. If you have ambiguous genitalia, either external or internal, then they might label you intersex. But a lot of times that condition is not seen till much later or a few years later in life. So the intersex community is a completely different community. It's linked to the trans community. And I believe it, and this is just my opinion, I believe at some point they will find a connection between the trans community and the intersex community. I think they are linked. I think it's just on a different level, and there's just different spectrums and just a spectrum of it that goes through. And I think intersex is in that. And a lot of doctors will say that too. Like I said, one is not predictive of the other. Physical attraction, we talked about that. Physical attraction is different from emotional attraction. And they can be the same sometimes, but I can be physically attracted to Daniel Craig, the new James Bond, because he has a cute butt, and say, oh, he has a cute butt. But that doesn't mean that I want to be romantically attracted to him and have a relationship with him. Oh my God, I'll kill myself. But, but I can look at him and say, he's very attractive, and be physically attractive. It's just, people just forget, it's human nature. It's ingrained inside of us, who we are and what we are attracted to, personality traits, everything. I mean, we're just attracted to different things, and it can either be male or female or androgynous, whichever. My wife identifies as, I think, what is she? As pan. It doesn't matter to her the gender. She loves the person. And lots of people are that way. So I'm emotionally attracted to my wife, luckily, and physically attracted to. And if you have both of those, that's awesome. So here's some numbers I want to go over real fast. So this is, I gotta get rid of this stuff. So this is our population from 2017 that we know of. Since 2016 to now, it's been very hard to track numbers because of, we all know the problems. It's been very hard to track numbers of the trans community because of the last administration. But these are the numbers that we have from 2017. So you can see the youngest age group with 13 to 17 has had the highest estimated percentage of individuals who identify as trans in the United States. And we're seeing those numbers go up more and more every year. So you can see these numbers yourself. This is from the Williams Institute. The Williams Institute has some of the best data out there. The Williams Institute and WPATH, which is World Professional Association of Transgender Health. Those are the two organizations that have the best data. Now the Trevor Project actually they've just put out a new study as well that I'm going to get to in a minute. And we're seeing numbers jump as well in that. So ages 13 to 18, and this is in Texas in 2017. So these were the numbers in Texas in 2017 during the bathroom legislations. And that's why we have these numbers. So you're able to see the differences and how many. What we think in Texas now, and hopefully we'll have some good numbers soon, is that we think that there's an average of around 250 to 270,000 trans people in Texas right now. We think that that's an average, but we don't have an accurate number and an accurate count. The community itself, especially the political parts, our political organizations are trying to get those numbers too. So here's the teen suicide statistics. This is from an LGBT youth report from 2018. So 77% of LGBT teenagers surveyed report feeling depressed or down over the past week. 95% are having trouble. We're having trouble sleeping in 2018. Can you imagine what it is now? I mean, I can't even imagine what it is now. So more than 70% feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness. 26% say they always feel safe in school. And as a teenager, I went through all of this as well. So I know how these teenagers feel, and that's why I work so hard to help them. But we're doing better within the school districts. They're calling in people like me to do more trainings and help them. So hopefully we can help with this. So what we do know is teens who receive support, their suicidal ideation decreases by 29%, right? So, teens who receive support, their suicide attempts decrease by 56% if they have support from family, friends, society, and in their school systems. So we see these numbers drop. And these numbers, I think, are for 2018. So we're seeing them drop now. This is something that I created. I do not have a piece of paper behind my name, just so y'all know. But I created this because this is what we've seen in Trans-cendance within the last 10 years, right? Our support group is in the middle. And because we've been able to help so many people in so many different demographics of specifically Tarrant County and Dallas County, then we see them get more involved in their school. They're getting more involved in voting and elections and people that really didn't pay much attention to the problem.
I think Finn froze for a moment. But
That worldwide organizations that help us. I'll take some questions in a second, but yeah. So these are just a few of them that do affirm the trans community and continue to affirm the trans community. This is one of the major victories that we've had in 2020. The reason Amy is up here is because Amy Stevens is the one who started that lawsuit. She was a trans woman who came out at work at I can't.
so Amy Stevens worked as a funeral director for nearly 6 years at Harris Funeral Home, Garden City, Michigan. Hired in 2013 because she informed her employers that she would be transitioning from male to female. Sadly, Amy died just 1 month before the historic decision on May 15th she died of ongoing health issues. So,
Hey, Sharon, I could add a little bit if you want for the.
yes, please.
As you see here, you see it on the screen, it says Obergefell. That was a 2015 Supreme Court ruling that legalized marriage equality okay, I think I'll hop back on in a second. Obergefell is what legalized marriage equality in 2015 from the Supreme Court. And then the Bostock ruling that Mr. Judge was just mentioning, that was a ruling in 2020 that 3 different cases, including Miss Amy Stevenson, where the Supreme Court ruled that sexual orientation and gender identity are protected statuses under the Civil Rights Act. And so it is now illegal as of 2020 to discriminate against someone based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. And so that was that ruling that Mr. Finnegan was referring to.
And Caitlin, could you tell me also in that little circle of that was written, it said GNC. Do you know what GNC?
Maybe gender nonconforming is what I was. Yeah.
Gender nonconforming. Okay.
That would be my best guess for GNC.
Okay. So Lauren, I would like to kind of ask you to be watching if Finnegan is able to get back on to our discussion.
He's joining right now.
Oh, he's joining right now. Okay, thank you. So we're also patiently waiting. That's nice.
I can't tell if he's back in.
Oh, there, welcome back.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Anyway, I apologize. We've been having problems with our internet lately.
Everybody does. Yeah.
And so now we're able to get jobs and hold jobs without being fired. But the precursor to that is Texas is a right to fire state. Texas can fire you for anything and not give you any reason for it. So, you know, it's hard to be able to make those lawsuits stick in Texas. But what I can tell you that I've learned from my colleagues within ACLU, Lambda Legal, all these every trans person that has taken a lawsuit like this, actually, there's been lots of them to the Supreme Court or the higher justices have won. Every single one has won. It's just they don't put that out there. I mean, because if they did, they'd see that everyone could be suing and winning these. Mm-hmm. So my colleagues tell me, if you have someone like that, send them to us because it's worth looking into a lawsuit, whether it doesn't matter where you are in the country, because every single trans person has won every single lawsuit that has gone against the federal or the state level courts. So just remember that.
Okay.
This is a little bit of what we've been through. 2017, the bathroom bills. 2019 was the Chick-fil-A bills, the religious freedom bills. And then this year, it's the bills, all 33 anti-trans bills, just literally directed at our kids, their parents, and their providers. All 33 bills were directed at our kids, their providers, and their family members. So, so you can see they have an agenda every session that we have to fight with. And it's so, I know 3 families that left Texas last week. They moved to Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico. They don't feel their kids are safe here in Texas. And it's very sad.
Yeah.
Social construct, I did a class for some teens with Planned Parenthood on social construct. That was a lot of fun. But so here's what you can do. We're almost done. Don't assume, right? We talked about don't label someone. So don't label someone. Don't assume someone is gay, lesbian, trans, or anything else, or even straight or cis. Just don't make any assumptions. Examine and challenge your own ideas about gender and gender biases. Challenge gender discrimination when you see it happening. How many people have been at a party with their kid, their little boy, and he plays with a little doll, right? And his father jumps on him because he's playing with a doll and says, "That's a girl's toy," blah, blah, blah. Would you speak up? Would you say something if you were there in that room? I would. As a kid, I have a younger sister. So, we and my parents were very diverse in our toys. We had trucks, we had dolls, we had stuffed animals, we had this. Luckily, my parents were very progressive in that. And I never got yelled at for that, as a little girl playing with a truck. But yeah, challenge that when you see that. Use inclusive language. Are you seeing anyone? Do you have a partner? Try to avoid wife, husband, anything that genders another person. I say my wife because my wife gave me permission to call her my wife, right? I asked her, is it okay if I call you my wife? Or would you prefer me say something else? But if you're asking someone else, are you married, right? How many times do you hear that? You're asking a woman, so do you have a husband? You just gendered their partner and you don't even married to a man or woman or trans person or anyone else. So yes. What? I can't. What? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's my wife.
Sorry.
I can't do anything.
I just need to know if we've got a way to pump up the spare.
No.
Thank you. That's all I
Okay,
need.
sorry. We're trying to get the tire fixed. Avoid terms like Mr. and Mr., sir, ma'am. If you have a waiting room, especially if you have a waiting room, please instruct your staff to say, don't use Mr. or Mrs. and ma'am. When I would go to the VA, I'm a veteran as well. When I would go to the VA I don't go to the VA any longer because they cannot get this right. And my stuff has changed in the system and they still say Mrs. Jones. And that's enough for me. I'm not going to go and be humiliated any longer at the VA. It's humiliating. It is horrible for a trans person mental health to get that pronoun wrong and do it in such a public way that they have to actually get out of a chair and walk and make themselves, visible to everyone. It's a vulnerability you need to put people in. So please try to avoid terms like Mr. and Mrs. And it's hard in the South. It's hard. I was raised to say Mr. and Mrs. I actually ran for office. I ran for the Texas House of Representatives. I'm the very first trans person to win a legislative election in the state of Texas, and I'm very proud to hold that honor. But as a candidate, oh my gosh, if I'm saying, little old lady for white hair, little old lady, and I'm not saying ma'am, as a good Southern boy, so you have to kind of learn when it's appropriate to use it and when it's not. You don't have to not stop it, just know when it's appropriate and when it's not, right? So add your pronouns to your email signature. This is something that you can tell people who don't even know you and haven't met you yet, that you are aware and you do have some education and you are an ally, especially it shows that you're an ally if you have your pronouns out beside your name. So add your pronouns to your email signature. Develop agency policies prohibiting discrimination based on gender identity. And that includes not just policies, it's paperwork, it's everything within your system, right? I'm currently working with Perimeter Mental Health Hospital I'm creating something to embed within their job orientation. So the definitions, all of that will be in their bi-weekly job training and their orientation. And the reason we're doing that is because that will, over time, will just be, it will be a part of their atmosphere and their culture and their climate. And it gradually becomes a part of that company. And that's what I'm trying to do with a lot of these companies is let's take baby steps, because only doing like an hour or two training once a year in a field where the turnover rate is so high, like we're not hitting everyone. So we need to be trying to hit as many employees as we can over a continuing education basis. So that's what I'm doing now with companies. So develop agency policy, respect people's pronouns and gender identities. What are your pronouns? You don't have to say gender pronouns. What are your pronouns? And it's never rude to ask someone that, never. The best way to do this is when you introduce yourself. Hi, my name's Finn Jones. He, him, his. Just that, like that. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. And that will encourage the other person more than likely to say their pronouns, or they'll ask you why you said your pronouns, which starts a great conversation, right? So there's always education moments wherever you can find them. So yeah, there's some resources within this area and some higher ones. We have Transgender Education Network in Texas. They're a lobbying group. They're the ones who have been fighting so hard at Capitol right now. I'm just so grateful for them. My poor Emmett Schelling, who's the ED of that organization, even had to have emergency surgery during session. And just, it's been horrendous. So if you can ever toss them a couple of bucks, you know, or just be an advocate for Transgender Education Network Texas, that would be great. So yeah, so that's my little mini session. So if people have questions, go right ahead.
Okay, me first.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So Finn,
Yes,
I've made a couple of I've made mistakes. It looks like.
make them too.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you want to stop sharing your screen so I can see?
Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry about
Okay.
that. How do I, there it is. I'm so used to doing this so much. I just, you know.
I know. Okay. So I use the language transgendered, like you said not to.
Mhm.
In fact, I think I made it worse because I said transgendered male, but you're saying old language, transgender man. Is that right?
Yes. I didn't have that. If a female like me, a female labeled female at birth and transitions to the opposite gender, then I'm a trans man.
Trans man.
And trans women is the opposite, right? So a male
Okay.
trans to female, they're a trans woman.
Okay, so it's okay to say trans man
Yes.
and not as opposed to full transgender man. Trans
You
man.
can say trans man, you can say transgender man. Just don't
Okay.
add in. If you want to
Okay,
use
so
something about they've transitioned, then say transitioned.
Yeah. Okay, I see. So,
Yeah.
then I was raised by a Southern woman to be right, and I need to be polite to people, and I say, "Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, sir." But what if I am at the airport, because this is ingrained in me, but I'm at the airport and I need to get by somebody, and I don't know what to say.
Why can't you just say, excuse me? Why do you have to add something on the end?
Because
We're good Southern people, right?
so just excuse me or pardon me or
Pardon me.
so Dee wants to say something. Dee, you want to say something? No, okay. Well,
Okay.
me wanting to say that's okay.
Y'all, I use y'all a lot, or folks. I use folks a lot. Folks.
Okay, so say, hey, I mean, that's rude, you know.
Not necessarily. Depends on how you say it.
Hey is for that's say hey, I need to get by, excuse me.
That's true.
Yeah.
But you can
Okay,
just say,
so
pardon me.
Pardon me, excuse
You
me.
say,
Okay.
pardon me, excuse me, pardon me. That's usually what I do. Pardon me, excuse me. And they'll know if you're right behind them saying something, they'll know it's them. You don't necessarily have to add ma'am or sir to the end of that. I mean, it's, you know, We add ma'am and sir a lot because it's just in society, and it's how we're taught as children how
I want to get somebody's attention.
right.
Okay, so how would you get someone's attention? Like their shoe is untied. Okay.
I mean, I'll try and say, like, try and get eye contact. Don't touch anybody. Don't touch someone. That's, I mean, my first reaction would be to tap them on the shoulder, but you know, touching someone just, but yeah, I usually try and get eye contact. And I just say, pardon me, excuse me. You know, sometimes I'll say sir, sometimes I'll say ma'am. Like I said, it's where you are and who you're talking to.
Yeah.
So always just remember that it's where you are talking to. If I was talking to my great grandmother now, I would always say yes, ma'am, because I would have trouble if I didn't, right? But if I'm talking to a trans person or a or gender fluid person, then I'm going to avoid pronouns unless they tell me their pronouns. So
Okay.
it hasn't.
Okay. So Gina Ann, you have a question?
Yeah, Finn, you said that you describe yourself as queer.
Uh-huh.
Can you explain that a little more as to what the differentiation between queer and anything else?
Sure. So queer is a term that's been like taken back up. It was a term in the 60s and 70s. It was a derogatory term back then. It's been reclaimed. And queer essentially means anything that's outside of the binary. You'll see lots of definitions, different definitions, but it essentially means anything outside of the binary. So if we really want to get technical, and this is a whole conversation over a beer, I have only had top surgery. I have not had bottom surgery, right? So if we're talking about sexual relationships, you know, I mean, we could really literally get technical and more technical on this, and a little bit intrusive in some ways, but I choose queer because I never identified as straight, and I still don't because I've never had bottom surgery. Nor do I want bottom surgery. I have absolutely no problem. That my gender dysphoria does not include the bottom. It does not bother me. It's the top for me. Now, it's not that for all trans people. All trans people are spectrum. It is a total spectrum. Some people have just a little bit of gender dysphoria that they may be able to correct with just clothing or hairstyles or whatever else. Some people like me had to go steps further and appear more male, which included hormone replacement, therapy, and then top surgery. I have no problem with the bottom. And if we really want to get technical, so technically I still have lesbian sex. If you really want to get technical, right? And that's where the muckiness gets in there, right? And and for me, what I tell people is don't overthink it. And if I call myself queer, then just take that at face value and respect that I call myself queer.
Jean, can I add a little bit too? So you'll hear the word queer applied sometimes, Janine, to both gender identity. Right. So how someone identifies, you'll also hear the word applied to sexual orientation. In that sense, sometimes it means just not straight. So anything that's not straight. You'll hear that term used both sexual orientation and gender identity.
Yep, absolutely. And that's our young people who have basically reclaimed that term. And every young person will tell you a different definition of the word. It's one of those words that floats out there and just kind of sticks to someone when they need to have another word to claim something, you know. But it really is just like Caitlin said, it's just something outside of the norm or outside of the binary. That's the best way to remember that.
So Finn, I'd like to ask this question. One of the things that we talk about in our training is that there's at any time in a child's journey, in a youth's journey, they can come out to you and they can express themselves to you. And one of the questions that we ask our specialists is to be open to listening to what that child says. Exactly what you're saying. They've learned, a child may have learned these different definitions, different places. So you don't want to make any kind of assumptions, but if a child is questioning their gender expression, right? We say to be supportive.
I think it's just, well, I don't really know what context you're talking about, but just like you said, to be supportive, just be affirming, be affirming. Don't poo-poo their identity. Don't say, well, that label doesn't fit you. You're not the judge of whether that label fits them or not. So if they've chosen that label, because choosing a label, I say all the time, labels are for tin cans and jars, but labels have their purpose in that they help give us a label to be able to say, okay, well, this is what it is. Now I can progress forward to work on that. Just like gender dysphoria, I never knew I had gender dysphoria. I had no idea. I didn't even know what gender dysphoria was. Before I transitioned, y'all, I didn't even know any trans people at all. I met one trans person, one. So, and then someone said, have you ever thought that you might be trans? And I'm like, I had to look it up. And I was a drag king, y'all, in Sears Springs, and I never knew a trans person. And I had to look it up. I didn't even know what it was. I had to look it up. So then I started seeing a therapist. And over the time, my therapist said, oh, you definitely have gender dysphoria. So let's start working on that. And when I did, y'all, literally, I was an alcoholic drug addict on the streets in Dallas in my 20s, lived on the streets in Dallas in my 20s, all of it, dropped out of school, everything. And then like my life, when I transitioned, my life literally just took off. I got married. I have kids now. I own my own home. I ran for office. I started my own nonprofit. I'm a public speaker. It's just literally my life literally just changed. Once I got that diagnosis, once I got that label and that diagnosis, I was able to fix things. And that's what we try to stress to people is let these children live their life and express and explore their gender. We all did it. We all did it. Whether you're cis, straight, gay, lesbian, trans, it doesn't matter. You did it as a child. You may not have realized you did, but you did. If you tried on your parents' clothing, that's exploring your gender, right? If you got a short hairstyle instead of a long hairstyle, if you're a woman, that's exploring your gender. You just don't realize it is.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I'd like to add something here too. So if a youth shares that their identity or their sexual orientation is something that everyone does new information to a lot of people, one thing that you can also ask them, in addition to being affirming, is to ask them who else knows, in the sense of and with that, ask them who, what are your pronouns? Who do you want me to use these pronouns around? Because youth may not be out to all of their family members, and may not be out at school or publicly. And if the youth tells you that they're only out to you as the CASA, talk to your specialist, because there could be some safety features that we need to look at as relates to child safety when they're in the custody of someone who's not their parents. But it is a very big safety issue when it comes to coming out and being out. And so make sure you are clear on who knows and who you can use their pronouns, their name, et cetera, around.
Absolutely. Yeah, my wife is an LPC for innovations in Keller. So she works with children, and she's had children come out to her and their parents don't know. So she keeps that a secret between, and she'll use a different name around the parents than they will, around different pronouns.
So I think we have one question from Susan.
Yeah.
Sorry, Susan, did you have a question?
I have a question. Could you, Finn, just explain gender fluid?
Sure. Gender fluid is you basically kind of swing between both genders. You don't necessarily settle on a gender. Your identity and expression is not necessarily settled on one gender. Like me, I express and identify as male all the time. Unlike my kid, Ryan, who swings back and forth, right? And some people get gender fluid, gender non-conforming. There's so many different terms that kind of each other. But just remember, gender non-binary, you do not identify with any gender, right? Gender fluid is you kind of you're on a spectrum. You go back and forth, swing between male, female, androgynous. So that's basically what it is. You can go swing back and forth between each. Yeah. And that's how you feel comfortable.
So Finn, I have a question. So if you're a child, so let's say a child asks another one, are you a boy or a girl? So what might you say? What do I say to that child? Do I say we don't ask those questions? Do I say,
Yeah.
just another comment?
I would say that's a rude question to ask someone. I mean, I would tell a child that's an inappropriate question. That's kind of
okay.
I would say, that might hurt their feelings. Attach an emotion to it so that they know that they could possibly hurt someone if they ask that question. Especially when we're talking about children, if we're teaching them lessons, they're gonna want to know why you can't say that, right? So I would say, well, you might hurt someone's feelings if you ask that. If it depends on the age of the child too. What age are they? Are they old enough to comprehend what you're saying? So,
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
yes, it does.
Here's the problem. Sometimes people overthink it too. It doesn't have to. Like, let's say that you're talking to a trans person and you accidentally screw up a pronoun. Don't go crazy. Just go, oh crap, I'm sorry. I'll get it right the next time. And move on. Don't overthink that. Don't overreact. Just keep moving. And in your head, here's a trick that my wife did when I started transitioning. What she did to try and get the pronouns in the name correct is every time she thought about me, she would change my face in her head. She would change female to male in her head. And it helped her start to remember to say he and Finn. And and that's what a lot of parents do. They'll just shift it in their head to change that gender in their head. And it helps them remember to say the correct pronoun or the correct name at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. But don't make it difficult. Don't make it hard. Don't make it complicated. It's seriously, all people want, and especially trans kids, is to be a kid. They don't, they don't care about all this stuff. They just want to be a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to be a kid. And for children who are in foster care, they just want to be accepted. They want to make connections,
Absolutely.
Possible.
And y'all know the numbers better than I do, that the number of foster kids the percentage is higher for the LGBTQ kids than it is for cis kids.
Yeah, I can share this real quick too. So about 30% of youth in foster care are LGBTQ, and about 5% of youth in foster care are transgender.
Wow.
Which is much higher.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And not even just in foster care. If you look at the kids that are homeless, 47% of kids who are sex trafficked are LGBTQ. 47%.
Because they're so vulnerable on the streets. Yes.
Well, right. And their parents are kicking them out on the street.
Right.
I've been preaching for a long time. We need to start training the parents. That's who we need to start teaching, is the parents.
Mm-hmm. Refusal to accept parental responsibility. That's one of the criteria that puts a child into foster care, where their parents decided that they cannot live with them. They will not provide care for them anymore. That's what we find is those children who are rapid, right? Refusal to accept parental responsibility, that there is higher percentage of LGBTQ youth.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, I have a question for you. I've gotten calls from QT saying, I have a kid here, a 13-year-old kid here who just got kicked out of their home. They say they're trans. My first response is to call the police. Or is that who I should call first, is the police?
Actually, in a situation where there's a child right there at that place, yes. because if you call the 1-800 number, to report child abuse,
Mhm.
it's at least 24 hours to get out. So,
Okay, yeah.
right. And what they'll do is the police will then call the night response unit for the DFPS and get the night response, a CPS investigator out there. And that they make sure that that child is safe that night. They would take that child and then they would start the investigation and see if there's any other. The first thing would be to start the investigation to see if there are any other family members that might offer a home for this child to try to keep the child safe, short of taking that child into conservatorship of the state.
Gotcha. It's just a sad.
I have a
That
question. Goes
Yeah.
back to what Caitlin was saying earlier about whenever a youth comes out to one of us. Would you recommend, if we know that they've only told it to us and they are trying to keep it private to everyone else, would you recommend us like checking in on how they're doing, how they're feeling, or should we let them come to us on their own terms with that type of information?
I think that is an individual basis because you'll know that child better than I would or anyone else would. But yeah, I would say check in when you feel like you need to. But also with TCI, and this is important for y'all to know, we actually have a virtual youth group as well. We just don't publish it out there for lots of different, do everything we can to make sure that our kids are safe. So we have a youth director that handles, it's a Discord group. Ages basically 6th grade through graduated or can't have graduated high school. So basically the same as youth minister ages, church ages. So if you ever have a child, even in the foster system, that needs to log in and be with other kids that are like them, just contact me and I'll put you in touch with Ari. We can't publish that out there because we're so worried about someone destroying that or doing something to these kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we have it built if you need it. So if a kid ever, Natalie, if a kid ever does need to talk to other kids, just contact me. I'm happy to connect you with Ari.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because a lot of times that helps the kids more than anything, just to be with other kids like them.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. Very educational.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll leave you with, since it's the whole question of children right now, transitioning or not transitioning and blah, blah, blah. Remember this, children do not transition. Children explore their gender. Adults transition, right? I transitioned. But my little young ones that I mentor, all they're doing is exploring their gender right now. So just remember that the kids are exploring their gender just like any other kid. So
They're just exploring. They're just questioning. That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank y'all so much. And if y'all ever need anything, I put my email address in the chat. Just reach out at any time.
All right. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, everyone, for
Have a
being
great
so
weekend.
attentive too. So
Yeah. And you're welcome to ask questions after this. You're always welcome.
okay. So if you need, are you saying you'll stick around just for a few minutes, Ben? Is that
Yeah,
what?
and I'm going to put our website in there too.
Okay.
Yep.
And don't forget to log your training hour. Also. So thank you. So if you have questions that you want to ask Ben, and he's still here.
Yeah, I don't have anything the rest of the day. Hey.
No, that's good. So you get an early start on your holiday, huh?
Yeah. Well, my wife also works at Arlington Life Shelter. So she has to work tonight. So tonight is my me night, as I call it.
Yeah. We need that too sometimes, don't we?
Yeah. But I'll share some exciting news with you though. That
Yes.
My role in Trans-cendance in my own organization is about to change. I'm about to step down as the ED, and I'm actually still own Trans-cendance to be a part of it. But I'm actually about to go start working for an organization called Primestone Learning to create a larger, basically an academic curriculum that does this very thing, that we can putting into universities, that we can offer to on a larger scale. So I've already actually put an entire coalition together of mental health professionals and social workers across Texas who have been working with the trans community for the last 20 years. So we're going to start working on new curriculum that we'll be able to offer to CASA and offer to other organizations and universities to be able to train people on a faster basis and get it out there quicker and really a more in-depth. I am a big fan of role modeling, of role playing, of practicing this with people. So anytime you can practice with someone, if you need to change genders with someone, absolutely do that. Also, one thing I want to touch on real fast. Let's say that good examples. So when I started transitioning, my sister became like one of my biggest allies. But the problem was that she would correct people out in public if they got my gender wrong, instead of allowing me to do it or say something, right? Remember, if you are the cis person, it is never your place to correct someone if that trans person is standing right there. For one thing, they may not be out to that person. So you may accidentally out someone if you correct a pronoun. Also, what should happen way before that situation happens is you should have a conversation with your friend or family member. How do we handle this situation if we're at grandma's and grandma has misgendered you eight times now? You know, how do you want me to handle that situation? So remember, it's the trans circle always. You're with the trans person. Let them always dictate what's going to be said or anything else. Let them lead.
I understand.
Yeah. You never want
just have to
somebody.
ask.
Yeah.
And that's part of us being willing to be open, right? To ask. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess we don't have more questions.
Well, thank y'all so much for being so attentive.
Okay.
And a real quick question for you. Real quick question before you go. We go back to suicide ideation and suicide challenges in the community. One of the narratives that's been out there for a long time is that, hold on, it'll get better. As you enter adulthood, as you find yourself in your community, that it's going to get better. And you kind of touched on that in terms of your life experiences, how it actually turned around for you. Can we offer our clients or our kids the hope that it's going to get better as they enter into adulthood and they begin to find themselves as we deal with these kids that are truly struggling with these issues?
Absolutely. I mean, things have changed so much. The problem is that all we see in the news is doom and gloom. That's all we see in the news. But within the LGBTQ community, there's been so much progress that we've been able to create so many different resources and avenues for these kids to be able to express themselves and identify. I mean, now, when I was growing up, there was no youth club for LGBTQ kids by any way, shape, or form. There was no gay straight alliance in my school. There was nothing like that. And now these kids have avenues that they're able to be in community with each other. And they have avenues that they can get out of the harmful family situation they're in. And that's really one of the biggest problems. That's what I was in as a child. I was just in a bad situation with my parents. And I was bullied at school. And there are a lot of kids going through the same thing right now. So now they have people like me that they can talk to. If you ever have a kid that needs a mentor, I'm happy to talk to them. I talk to lots of kids, lots of my mental health partners that I partner with. I mentor a lot of their kids. I talk with a lot of their kids, just as like a big brother or a big uncle would. So that's the big difference, is there's people and there's information that they can talk to now and get to. So yeah, it's absolutely going to get, and we will make it get better for them. We will help it get better for them. If anyone needs help, seriously, I will do whatever I can to help them. Yep.
Perfect, thanks.
Because I don't want kids to end up like I did. I don't want kids to end up dropping out of college because they're drinking themselves to death because they can't figure out what their mental health problems are. You know, I don't want to end up on the streets. I had to join the military to get off the streets. You know, I don't want kids to get to that point. I want kids to start off on the right foot. So that's my whole hope, is that we can get them on the right foot from the get-go.
Thank you so much, Finn. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anybody else? No.
So Finn, just let me know when you want me to come and talk about CASA.
I will do. We, so our